that you...
Oh, no. Not gay marriage is bad. I don't believe in gay marriage. It's
Oh, yeah, sorry. Gay people can't get married because the religious connotations of marriage imply that it has to be between a man and a woman.
yes,
Okay.
but civil
Is
unions
there...
I have very little problem with.
Yes. Yeah. Is there any one of these topics that your heart is drawing you towards, that you're itching to talk about specifically?
I'm pretty neutral when it comes to everything. I'm more of a. I tell you the truth when I bring up politics to people. I'm more or less just ask them a question. How they respond is how will dictate how I respond.
I just mean with regard to this particular conversation. Is there a specific topic you want to talk about, or do you want
Eh,
me to choose?
Dealer's choice.
All right. Um, don't call me a drug dealer. That's slander. So I guess we can talk about tariffs first. Why why do you like tariffs?
Because I believe we should incentivize more American manufacturing.
Why do you think that tariffs are better than subsidies as far as incentivizing American manufacturing?
Define subsidies.
A subsidy is a government funding of a specific industry or corporation within an industry
Uh,
so
because
as to financially incentivize development in that industry.
I don't believe fundamentally I don't want the government involved too much in internal economics. I believe we should set laws for it, but I don't believe the government should be funding it. I believe, and this just goes to another belief of mine that societal we've given a lot of our societal obligations to the government, and I don't agree with that.
Um, what's the difference between giving funding to did you just come, Edens? All right. What's the difference between giving government funding to a specific industry or company or group of companies versus taxing that industry or company or group of companies on imports? Why is one intervention and the other isn't?
Well, both are interventions.
Okay.
Intervention. One, I believe, is more moral than the other.
You think taxation is more moral than funding?
Yes, because you are raising prices on certain objects. Yes, but you're not saying you have to pay these. Versus funding, which is usually made by printing money, and we can go
No,
on. But funding, which our government usually does by printing money, is
no,
stealing from American citizens versus
we don't fund things by printing money.
we
We
do, and we've
No,
been
we
printing
don't.
money
You
money a
can't.
lot
You
recently.
can't. You When you print money, you don't make funds. You just devalue the currency. Also, it doesn't matter whether we print money. It matters whether it gets circulated into the economy, which is determined by interest rates, and the Fed set that. But
Mhm.
it's neither here nor there. It's not. Yeah, that's not. You you don't. I'm not sure what the you're regulating commerce because
Mhm.
you're taxing imports.
Mhm.
How is that more moral than
Then
allocating existing funds within the
those
budget?
funds can go to somewhere else better. And
Well,
again,
I mean, the
when I
money that the government is spending on the taxes could go to someplace better, like reinvesting in the company.
that's also true, but I
Well,
believe
that would
fundamentally
be an argument
better
against
to.
tariffs.
I believe it's better to incentivize rather than I think it's better to incentivize people to buy American good than it is to push money into uh, certain industries.
Well,
And I
but
understand there's
that's
always going to
why
be
you well, no, the way you incentivize people to buy American goods is by subsidizing them.
or
And the benefit to that over tariffs is that as a result of subsidies, you don't see higher prices.
or we tariff them, they buy American goods, Americans can get the quote unquote living wages that people believe that Americans are worth, and without the government to dipping its finger into the internal economy.
Well, it is. I mean, it is dipping its finger. It's
Now it's
fisting.
saying
It's
we're not going to
fisting.
allow
It's
certain
not
options.
just a finger, it's the whole fist.
Yes,
It's
but it's not
again,
saying
it's levying a tax on commerce. So
it's
that's I'm
not.
not sure
So
where you're getting this idea that it's not interference.
it is interference, but it's
Okay.
not a tax. And the reason why it's not a tax is because there are options. It'd be one thing if the government was like, if you want to buy any sort of lumber, you're going to be paying 10% extra. That would be a tax. Versus you saying, hey, if you want to buy lumber from this country, it's going to be 10% more. Frankly, I believe we should do it.
It's
And
not that's like saying the income tax is an option because you could just choose not to make money. But also some cases we don't have options.
like what?
When's the last time the US had manganese or tantalum or tin or strontium or niobium or gallium or graphite or yttrium or
Well, we do
bismuth?
have graphite here, but
It's
when
not
the last time?
self-sufficient. It's not self-sufficient, and we don't have domestic sources of things like manganese, tin, tantalum, strontium, and niobium.
Well, that's why we have trade.
Yeah, but then you don't have the option not to pay the tax. The only way to get access to these materials is by paying the tax. So your
Or you
argument that
pay the
you have the
tax.
option, that you have options not to pay the tariff is not true because you can't source these things
In
domestically.
most cases, it is. Not in all cases, but in most cases.
I don't know about most.
You're
But
buying
even
corn
then,
from Mexico. We can
but
grow
even
our
then,
own corn.
but even then, we can understand that the reason why we import these things in the first place is because it's more cost effective to do. If you're intentionally cutting off uh, American companies from the most cost effective means of getting their resources, how is that not interference? How is that not a tax?
Again, it is interference, but it's not a tax because it could grow more, especially if we lower our regulations on farms. I was going to say corn, but it
How
is
are
a little bit more expanded than just corn when it comes to our regulations, like milk. We can lower our regulations on.
what kinds of regulations would make it cheaper to produce something like corn or milk
We're calling them regulations cheaper.
if we got rid of them?
Well, fundamentally, regulation on um, tractors. We
Like, what's an
currently
example of a regulation on a tractor that makes it more expensive to grow corn in the United States?
okay. Well, I can't bring out a specific example, but I can tell you how
Okay,
most regulations work by
I'm
saying, hey,
good.
because if we need to put more money into making sure this process happens this way. And then I could also talk to you about the fact that in most cases, there are regulations in Avery City that don't allow people to. There are some places that are, and I believe in most places it is, but there are also other places where you're not allowed to grow things without government intervention. And I used to live in a city where that was the case. I no longer live there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have specific examples of regulations that you think we should get rid of, then I'm not sure what to do with that. But I mean, regardless, i- it's not in the interest of these companies to do the more expensive domestic production route. Um, and if if we have to get rid of safety regulations in order to make it cheaper to grow domestically, I'm
It's
not in
not the
favor of that.
regulations.
Well, you don't know what types of regulations they
Well,
are.
if we were to use milk, there are regulations impacting milk that aren't just safety regulations. There's a
So
certain number,
again, I'll ask,
certain
like,
amount of milk that can
can you give an example of a regulation that would make it cheaper if we got rid of it?
yes, there was a certain amount of milk you're allowed to sell. If you go over that number, you have to dispose of the amount of whatever you have over that number. We have that in our country. And I might be misstating what it actually is, but I met a couple of farmers who talked about having to dispose of milk specifically because the government would not let
I
them sell it.
I don't know what kind of regulations you're talking about. In the county I live in, there are no limits on how much milk you can sell.
Well, there were, based on what I was told by those farmers.
Jola Vision. Smash like subscribe. Um if you want to I mean, if you want to send me evidence that that type of regulation exists, that's fine. That there's no federal regulation on the amount of milk you're allowed to sell. So if companies want to move which county they operate in so that they can sell more milk, they have the right to do that. And that doesn't require deregulating the industry or uh, importing. I'm not sure how much milk we import either, so I'm not sure why that's particularly relevant
No,
to.
I'm saying as an example of a regulation that would lower the amount of stock in America. I don't know specifically if we are in state, though I'm
Well,
pretty sure we
if
are
you're
exporting milk as well.
if we're talking about deregulating for industries that make domestic production cheaper so that we can avoid paying tariffs, then it would seem like you would want to give an example that's relevant to an industry that would be facing tariffs, which would be an industry that we import a lot in service of. But either way, I mean, I don't. Again, I still don't understand the moral argument. I don't see the moral difference
Because I believe it's
between
better to
in
incentivize people to buy American, even if we have to pay a higher cost. That is the moral. That is the moral argument that I'm making.
yeah, but it would be even better to
To
incentivize people to buy from American goods without having to pay a higher cost. And so
true, our
the
money
question I haven't gotten an answer to is why a tax is more moral than a stimulus of a certain industry. I don't
because
think you're going to be able to make a good argument uh, concerning that question.
because
So unless what?
it devalues money.
That's
We
not
don't have
how
a set number of money.
that's not how allocation of federal funding works.
It is and it isn't. It's not always the
No,
case.
if it was, we would never have a budget deficit.
No, we do have a budget deficit, and that's
Yeah,
why.
that's proof that that's not how federal funding allocation works. Because
But
we don't just print, we don't, I'm sorry, you gotta let me talk a little bit.
okay,
If, if if the way that federal funding allocation worked was that we just say, this is how much a program is going to cost, therefore we're going to print that amount of money and then fund it, then we would never have a budget deficit because we'd always just print the amount of money we need to get the budget passed. But we do have a budget deficit because the way we allocate federal funding is not by printing money, it's by taking tax money, determining which programs we want to fund, paying for as much of it as possible with tax money, and then generally incurring debt to pay for the rest. Um,
And how do you
which
get the money to pay for the rest?
that's what I just said. You take loans
From who?
from foreign investors,
From foreign investors and who?
foreign investors and foreign investors.
And the Federal Reserve as well. The
The
majority
Federal
of
Reserve
US debt is
doesn't
to
give the
US
Federal
citizens.
Reserve doesn't give loans.
They do, but it's not in the way that we view loans as a
Not to the
regular simple.
not to the government, not for the federal budget.
The way that it's been told to me, and if I'm wrong on this, I'm wrong on it. But if we don't have enough money based on taxes, and some people believe the majority of the tax isn't particularly used to fund things, is used to keep inflation down by destroying the money because they're continuing to print money and they've been printing money every year. But if I'm
The
wrong about
the
this,
Treasury Department determines how much money gets printed.
mhm,
The Federal Reserve influences indirectly the borrowing costs of the government by
okay,
determining interest rates and through open market operations. It buys
all
and
right,
sells treasury securities, but that just determines how much money is in circulation. It's up to
mhm,
the treasury to determine how much money gets printed. But again, the issue of how much money we print has nothing to do with the value of the dollar per se. It's determined by how much money is in circulation.
yes,
But
and
the
how do we
Fed
determine
doesn't
how much
the
inflation is
Fed
about to
never
destroy
the
it?
Fed never has and does not loan money to the federal government.
It's not
Uh-huh.
specifically a loan, and I might be wrong about it being the Federal Reserve, but it's not specifically a loan. It's they print the difference. They do, and that's why we get into situations where inflation is going up every year. If they weren't printing the difference, inflation wouldn't be going up. It would stay stagnant, and it will be entirely based on a commodity that our dollar would be behind. But no, it's not. It's based on current supply and demands.
Well, the
Hence
I
why a lot of
mean,
people are
the
calling to
if
go
you're
back
if
to
you're
those.
against, we're jumping around a little bit because I wanted to talk about tariffs specifically, and now we're starting to talk about inflation. But if you want to talk about inflation, one thing that's really bad for that is this T word that's just escaping me. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, tariffs.
Okay.
Because what happens when you force companies to raise costs for consumers in order to stay competitive and also pay their workers more to stay competitive. You raise costs in general and you raise wages in general. What happens when costs and wages both go up? We call that inflation.
Okay.
So
And my counterpoint,
if you're against inflation, but you want to incentivize American domestic manufacturing, a great way to do that while avoiding inflation is this S word that's also I seem to be forgetting a subsidy. As the best of both worlds, you incentivize domestic manufacturing, but you avoid worsening inflation. If you're against inflation and you want American manufacturing, you're going to prefer subsidies over tariffs.
okay. My counterpoint to that is have inflation come up or down ever since Trump imposed the tariffs?
Um, I don't know that it's
It is down. It went from 2.8% in March to 2.4% in April, which is this
do,
month.
do you know okay. Do you know why
And
that
that's for the
is?
Bureau of Labor Statistics, by the way.
So first of all, how long has it been since the tariffs were first imposed?
About a month, actually. It's May
Okay.
1st. What's my
Second of
mother's
all,
birthday?
do you know the difference between long-term and short-term economic impacts?
True.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
know.
can we agree that sometimes policies will have short-term impacts that look a certain way, and then we'll have long-term impacts that look a very different way? like in
That's all.
every
Yeah.
financial crisis in our country's history.
Hmm. Wait, what was that
Okay,
last one you said?
like in every financial crisis in our country's history, it started with overzealous action by financial institutions, banks, and other firms
I agree.
because they saw growth.
Also by government meddling, but let's not get involved with that too much.
Yeah, let's not, because you haven't shown a great depth of knowledge with regard to regulation on commerce, and I don't want to pick your brain on
In
that when
North
we're trying to talk
Carolina
about something
specifically,
else.
I just pulled it
But
up. SL 1971
to
77
not
dash.
get into the to not get well, thank you, Edens. So that's ve- that's very that's very insightful, Edens. I never thought of it that way. I should just I should just allow him to disagree with me and give up. Thank you.
No,
This whole
this is a
project of
healthy
having
debate.
constructive this whole project of trying to have productive disagreements with people through responsible conversation, it's all based on a lie. Edens, you're right. We should all just give up and go to our rooms and be quiet. If you don't have something to say that's going to contribute directly, if you don't have something to say that's going to contribute, if you don't have something to say that's going to contribute to the substance of the conversation, I would ask that you please shut the fuck up. So, Jaden, ooh, I'm proud of you, buddy. All right, Jaden. So angry. I'm so angry. So Jaden, so Jaden, so
Yeah.
Jaden, so so Jaden. With
Mhm.
regard, let me. You okay, buddy? You okay, buddy?
Hey, let's not get into all that. It's just we have a
Yeah.
disagreement on it and we're arguing about the fact.
Jaden, do you feel forced? Do you feel like I'm forcing something down your throat?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, so Eden's, I appreciate you feeling I appreciate you feeling all right. He's rambling. So you can leave. I'll mute you right now. Jola, where are my perms? Give me my perms, Jola. I know. I know.
What's going on?
Jola, can I have my perms in this chat, please?
For what?
I told you to please shut the fuck up. I'm trying to have a conversation with another person.
With another person. Wait, who did you tell to shut up?
Okay. I really preferred how the conversation was going when you were doing that. So please go back to doing that.
And then I
Oh.
called it out, and then now you're angry. And then you
Okay.
you literally shut down, bro. You literally shut down. It's
I'm
on fucking
s-
screen, bro.
I'm
And now you're trying to
angry.
silence.
Shut down.
You're trying to silence me, bro. You literally got shut down, bro. Like
Okay.
just go.
All right.
It's
Thanks,
not.
Shola.
It doesn't let you move him.
No, it doesn't let me do anything in this chat. Every other
Oh,
chat I can do stuff in. But so anyway, sorry about that.
Um,
Um, Jaden, the yeah, again, I guess both of these things are the government interfering in the economy. Or I guess you were talking about you had a response to the idea that if you care about inflation and domestic manufacturing, you're going to prefer subsidies over tariffs. I think you're in the middle of responding to
Wait,
that.
oh, yeah, I was. But
Yeah,
what I
go
was
ahead.
saying was that I would prefer it, even though you are right, it will raise. Though I'm gonna tell you this, I'm a much harder liner on it than Trump is. I believe April 1st, and I believe in February 1st, he should have did all the tariffs and just left them there. But that was just me. He caved. It is what it is. I'm not gonna argue about it. I'm not gonna be fully happy about it because what I, in my perfect society, my ideal perfect society, it would be we have tariffs just high enough to make foreign goods just slightly more expensive than American goods. Or I would do it, I'm not gonna say just slightly. I would say significantly higher than American goods for maybe about 4 or 5 years. Give it 10 years. Give it 10 years. 10 years so that Americans could start manufacturing, and then after a certain period of time, after we've realized that American manufacturing is probably as up as it's going to be given this current climate, I would lower the tariffs to keep it competitive uh to the American manufacturing so that it would either stabilize or would keep them competing to reduce prices more and more.
DJ,
Well,
really quick, to like update. I wasn't here for a second. Can you just update me on what you guys covered so far? Is just like tariffs?
yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just got an overview of like 4 or 5 topics that he feels strongly about, and we jumped into tariffs, and then
All
that
right.
krill fuck decided that he didn't like us having that conversation.
Yeah, there's 30 people
Um,
watching on the stream. I'm gonna keep it going for another half hour till 1:30 then,
sounds
or
good,
Eastern time.
and
Alrighty.
we can keep talking after the stream ends. I'm just here to get Jola some extra discretionary funds for his political assault, for his funding of his political assault on fascism and also free speech and the traditional family. Um but yeah, so I mean, I guess the issue with this idea that we'll start with tariffs and then over time we'll lower them, um but we'll still keep American manufacturing competitive with the rest of the world. My problem with that is that American labor is always going to be valued higher than labor from a place like China. So we're we're
Yeah.
limited in how much we're going to be able to lower those tariffs. Because
Hmm.
China is always going to have its workers be paid way less than American workers. So the
Oh, yeah.
prices are always going to be higher on American manufacturing.
Oh, you are entirely right. And fundamentally, the only time prices are going to lower my menu, based on what I fundamentally believe, is if my perfect world to the most extreme dystopian version of it, what's going to happen is the American labor is going to get knocked out by robots, and it's just going to be that, which will be in the exact same position here, only a permanent upper class and a permanent lower class, which I also don't support. I would also support the government creating laws saying only 25 to 35% of your workforce can be robots so that we keep American labor, even if that would put us behind other countries.
Um, yeah, I think that sort of relies on a misunderstanding of like supply and demand. Like if if the cost of labor goes down to zero, which is what would happen if all work or the vast majority of work was done by robots or AI of some kind, then in order to stay competitive as a company, the cost of your product would also have to be either zero or near zero. because if you sell your products for $5, but the cost of manufacturing is like 1 cent for every company, another company can just be like, all right, we're going to sell our product for $4 now. And you have to lower it to $4 to be competitive. Naturally,
Agree with you, except
price.
for the fact that it seems like it's the opposite. And I understand. I agree with the theory behind everything what you're saying, because I agree with that theory, supply and demand. The problem is, I've been really big into Nintendo recently. You heard about how much they're going to be charging for games?
No.
$90, and
Okay.
PlayStation is joining them. Xbox seems to be the only one keeping games at a low, or at least trying to keep games at a lower price.
Well, again, they're able to charge as much as consumers are willing to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
In
but
in the world where, and by the way, I believe at the future where the work is being done by robots, we'll probably have universal basic income, which that leads into a whole nother problem. So even in my perfect solution, it has flaws, and I will admit it. But I
again,
believe we need to do
if
something to ensure
if people are unable and or unwilling to pay a certain price for a certain product, the price of that product will decrease.
that's
Um, and so that's just what's that's just how the market works. And
true.
so
In the market.
in a world where nobody is employed because the only things making products are robots, nobody's going to be able to pay $90 or even like $5 or the inflation adjusted equivalent of $5 because nobody's going to be making that money. So the
In
like
that
the
situation, we should probably get off of that subject because we're delving deep into theories and trying to peer how the world's going to be under a very specific set of circumstances.
Sure. Yeah,
But
we don't need to stay on that.
yeah,
Um, and I guess with the a little under half an hour we have left, we can finish on the tariff thing real quick. There's a whole other question here that I like to get into when I talk about tariffs, but I guess just like quick TLDR, I don't uh I don't I'm not okay with making the assumption without warrant that American manufacturing is a good thing if we have more of it. We're already at full employment right now, and the types of labor that America does is higher in value and less physically taxing than the types of jobs that we'd be doing if we brought back manufacturing. So I'm not sure why we want to pay more money so that we can have lower employment rates and more unfilled job opportunities for jobs that no one wants to do. If you want to
well,
respond to that and then we can move on to something else, we can do that.
that is arguing that if there were more jobs, unemployment would go up. And I disagree. If there were more jobs, unemployment would go down. But
We're
as
at
well
full
as
employment right now.
unemployment was at like 3 points. It might be at 4 point something. Between 3 and 4 point something. I don't really remember.
Yeah, that is the ideal rate of unemployment
I
because
agree.
you
I
have
agree. And more
yeah,
than likely in this, I don't believe unemployment will change. But you know what would change? The supply of jobs. There will be a demand for labor. There will be a higher demand for labor for a higher supply of jobs. If we get jobs like that, you would get more living wages because if a company can hire you at $15 an hour now, but you can go and get another job where you're making $17 an hour, you would be going and making more. Most people would choose, I'm not gonna say most people, I actually have a cousin who decided to go with a dollar pay cut because the job was too hard for him. Still don't know why he. Well, I understand why he lived about an hour away from his job, but I believe that increasing manufacturing in the country will also increase wages.
Yeah, but it'll also increase costs.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
believe
which is just inflation.
increasing in cost is not the same as increasing in inflation.
Increased costs plus increased wages matching the increased in costs is kind of the definition of inflation, because you're
Not
still producing the same amount of goods and resources. There are goods and services. There has not been a change in demand. You've just
be a change.
taken
Yeah.
you've taken the thing that's supplying basic like commodities, and you've made the production of those commodities more expensive by raising the costs and raising the wage for the people who make it. But the actual demand for labor hasn't gone up. You're producing the same amount of stuff, but now there's more money circulating in the economy because you're spending more and paying more. That is literally inflation.
Yes and no. And the reason why I would classify it as not inflation is, what do you think is the major cause for housing to be? And this is one of my major expertise because I'm currently in college for construction. But what do you think one of the, and I know it sounds like a tangent, but I promise I'll get to the point. But what do you think one of the major causes for house prices going up is?
Well, I know
Like
that.
firms
Well,
buying
I
too
mean,
many.
you can just say.
It's regulations. And when I bring up
Okay.
regulation, I mean specifically that. Do you
Okay.
know what we used to build out of?
I'm guessing more lumber, thicker wood.
More lumber, thicker wood, less processed, less pretty much everything. We used to build out of the most cheap products. And in construction, in fact, I'm pretty sure it was Joe Biden who passed this bill. I don't know if it's still in effect because of the change in administration. It wasn't a bill, it was a regulation. But in North Carolina, they were trying to make it so, or at least the federal government was strong arming North Carolina into saying you have to change your building codes so that instead of a 2x4, you have to use 2x6s,
Okay.
which would it would both lower the size of houses. The houses would stay the same size, but you would have less space in it by like a factor of an inch on every side, inch and a half. But the cost would go up. That's not inflation. The price of the good of a 2x4 doesn't change. It's the fact that you're
Well, yeah, because you're using different materials. We
exactly.
we yeah, we can talk about regulations and the economy more generally. I do want to because we're running out of stream time. I want to try to get to one of these other issues. Uh, I think the pro-life thing and the trans stuff and the gay, like marriage versus civil union stuff, is probably a lot of that, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to relate to your religious beliefs. And so
Really biological.
yeah, well, with the trans stuff specifically, and maybe the abortion stuff to an extent. Unless you prefer to talk about one of those things, though, just to avoid getting into the like deeper religious question. And we could talk about all of this for as long as you want once the stream ends. I just want to prioritize brevity. Um,
Fine, it's fine.
do you want to talk about the immigration thing real
Oh, sure.
quick?
We can.
Um, so uh, we're both against illegal immigration.
Yep.
Um, Now, I think the disagreement is going to be on the best way to stop illegal immigration. Um, I'm thinking that when I ask you what the best way to do that is, you're going to say something like what Trump is doing: increase deportations, allow ICE agents to do more unilaterally, get the wall, um, and sort of just crack down on ports of entry, right?
Uh, I don't believe he's going far enough personally, but Yeah,
Sure,
because
but it's something like going in the direction Trump is going, basically border security, right?
not just that. I believe fundamentally we need to attack the incentive structure.
Um, as in like America being a place where there's economic opportunity. You want to attack
No,
that?
if you're a company and you're found to hire illegal immigrants, you get fined into oblivion. That's that it. Because it's already
Okay.
illegal to hire them, but companies are still doing that. I believe that you shouldn't hire them, and if there is no economic activity for them, because hiring them would pose too much of a risk, you would lower the amount of illegal immigration.
Okay, yeah. So removing economic opportunity for people who come here illegally.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, yeah. So I would disagree. I think the best way to get rid of illegal immigration is to increase the ease and capacity of our system to uh, approve legal immigration. I think the best way to do this is very simple: lift or substantially raise visa caps. We still, and then increase funding for immigration courts. We still vet these people. We still make sure that they're coming in on a legitimate basis. They still have to come here legally. Once they're here, they have to pay taxes, do all the stuff that an immigrant should have to do. Um, but we make it far easier for them to do that. And in this respect, we're allowing those people to come in legally, like Trump said he wants. Um, and then that reduces the incentive to come in illegally because you're not at risk of being prosecuted or deported if you get found to be here illegally. It also
Well,
reduces the burden on the deportation wing of ICE.
I would actually, and I don't know if this comes as a shock to you, would be in support of stuff specifically like that. The problem is I believe if you're already a legal citizen, you should have no claim to citizenship ever. Basically, if you get deported once for being an illegal immigrant, I'm not saying like if you overstay a visa for a couple of months or a week or so. I'm saying like if you come here, you build a life, and you're an illegal immigrant, I believe once you get kicked out, you should never have citizenship at all. I believe we need to be as forceful as possible. But I will also support like my girlfriend, yeah, girlfriend, fiance, whichever one you want to call it, is an immigrant. She came here from Burma. I am a big supporter of legal immigration, and I can see that I don't know about making it easier to come here, but I definitely support making it more streamlined.
Well, when I say easier, less um I don't mean less of a restrictive process of like background checking. I just mean like if you qualify for a visa, you get to come in.
Oh yeah, of course. I would always support that.
Yeah. That's very different from the way our immigration policy operates today, which is
Yeah,
that you can qualify for a visa and still have to wait several years before entry.
yeah. In
And
fact, in the
yeah.
event of my girlfriend, she had to stay in a refugee camp for about a year or so before she was able to come to America and become a citizen.
Yeah. And I
And if
think
you know anything about the Burma saying, you know that it's not a very pleasant place to stay.
Burma's also Myanmar, right?
Yeah, Myanmar. It's in Myanmar.
Why do they call them both?
I think it's more dialectic, and technically it's not in Myanmar. It's like right beside, it's between it and Thailand, but
Oh, it's a
it's in the same
region.
general area.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the same area where if you're Burmese, you're in both Myanmar and Thailand.
I say pick a damn name.
Me too.
Sorry. No, the Yeah, and so I think the majority of illegal immigration is just based off of the fact that the process to come here legally is not streamlined enough, and that we could solve the majority of illegal immigration by lifting a lot of visa caps. And
A lot
that's
because a influx of immigration without taking the proper steps of naturalization could cause major problems in the future. And we've seen that happen in other countries as well.
I think if you're talking about crime,
No, it's not specifically crime, it's different culture shocks.
okay, I
Like
do
practice
think
in Michigan where they're doing female circumcisions. Yeah, circumcisions, despite the fact that if you were to look at what it is, it's definitely illegal, but they're still doing it in our country is a terrible thing.
um
But it's a practice that they have where they came from and the practice they continue to keep.
how many cases